Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Hey travel, what is the absolute worst thing that happened to you while you were traveling? It could be anything from visa problems, being a victim of crime, etc.
Crazy Japanese woman in her 40s sitting next to me on a flight from Tokyo to Paris. I got a glimpse of craziness when she tried putting her small bag on the top bin and it fell on her head and she screamed really loud scream and the crew came to have a look at her and help her with her bag. I mean, come on, it was a small leather bag. It probably didn't even hurt. This scream was not justified. Then she initiated some broken English small talk with me about how it is her first trip to Europe and she was doing it all alone. Something about movies in Paris then. Drink service starts, she orders a champagne, wine thing, can't remember. Puts on a classical music concert on her entertainment system. For some reason she was taking minute videos of the screen. Also like 20 photos of different parts of the video. Give me thumbs up for no reason. Orders a whiskey and makes a flirty joke with the male flight attendant, and we just give each other a Jim from The Office look. Because she had already called him for a blanket and then also for some headphones and now for her third drink. She sleeps with her headphones on and the half-full whiskey glass in her hand. Surprise, the whiskey starts pouring on my jeans. I take the glass away kindly. Let her sleep. Wakes up, starts watching more concerts and taking videos of them. When we land, she calls the flight attendant to get her bags out. That was it. It was a difficult experience.
Was traveling to Madrid from Florence and had to switch trains in Milan. There was an unscheduled train strike happening, and so there was no second train for me to catch. And that one was the only one leaving that day. Staff were unhelpful when they found out I didn't speak good Italian and refused to help. I ended up finding police and asking them for help. And when they spoke to train staff, they said they wouldn't accept my Eurail pass to reschedule a train and I had to pay full price for a ticket. Hostel in Madrid had to be cancelled without refund. And I was out of funds. I went to a cafe near the station to hook up to Wi-Fi with my laptop and messaged my mom to wire me some funds. I was 18 at the time. The cafe were a bunch of mafia that charged me 18 euros for a fucking Coke and Wi-Fi. I ended up sleeping on the stone ground of the train station that night before just jumping on a train to Paris and making my way to London from there to fly home. I've never wanted to go back to Italy since then.
Took a bus from Kathmandu to New Delhi. Bus was mostly empty at the beginning. A Polish guy up front suffering from altitude sickness or something. Periodically vomits blood everywhere. Get into Sunoli first night. Burger is closed, so have to wait 7 hours until it opens. Sunoli is the biggest shithole in the world. Truly depressing. Finally cross the border. Driver and bus attendant immediately fill the bus with goat herders and peasants. When I bought the ticket, they swore they wouldn't sell any tickets after Kathmandu. Drive all day with no food, water. Finally arrived in New Delhi after 48 hours of shit travel. Think fuck it, after that I'm staying in a decent hotel. Check into a 5-star place, catch dysentery there.
Go to Oktoberfest with Dad. At the end of the day, take a train to where our hotel is supposed to be. The train stops at a small station in the middle of nowhere. Everyone gets out. We don't have any real indication, just the reservation papers and a guidebook. This was before smartphones. Also, we don't speak German at all. We are the only people as far as the eye can see at almost 10 p.m. Dad calls the hotel, they ask for reservation details and say they'll send a taxi. 1.5 hours later the taxi arrives. Dad approaches the car but the driver honks, shouts at him and moves away in reverse. Won't let us close to the car. Eventually says in broken English that he wants to see our papers. Dad gives him our passports and the hotel reservation through an inch gap in the window. The driver calls the hotel to confirm our identities, shouts some more and eventually lets us in. 40-minute drive uphill we get to the hotel. Driver says they will pay, not us. Enter the hotel with the driver, he goes to talk to the receptionist. A shouting match begins as the receptionist clearly doesn't want to give the driver money. The driver wins the argument and leaves with money. Visibly angry receptionist gives us the keys to our room then asks for tax payment which wasn't on the reservation and we had paid weeks in advance. Probably just wanted the cash he gave the taxi dude back. Dad tells him to call his manager to confirm this. He makes up some excuses to not call. He says fine, let's call the cops then maybe they know what to do. Suddenly we can pay tomorrow, it's fine, really, good night. This extra payment is not brought up by other staff for the rest of our stay.
Thought I'd share this as a warning, even though it miraculously turned out okay in the end. Happened to me a couple months back. Greentext for brevity. Traveling Southeast Asia. I got really sick traveling for the first time ever when I get to Saigon. Got quite sick again about 2 months later in Vietnam too. I don't know what's up with the food there because I've eaten sketchy street food for months at a time in Latin America and Africa and elsewhere in Asia. Never got ill. In the hostel bunk for a week. Don't go anywhere but the toilet. Share a dorm room with a really friendly local working girl. This place is sort of dodgy. One evening, 2 Vietnamese guys move in. One is a young twink, the other an older little guy with a pot belly. They sleep in the same bed together. Give them some cheese I thought I could stomach but couldn't. Chat for 2 minutes. They seem weird but okay. My bag is locked and closed as it always is. Not locked to the bunk because I never left the room. This is where I fucked up. Wake up the next morning. Bag gone, passport, all ID, all money, all cards, gone, fuck. I had almost $1,000 cash too because I was going to buy a motorbike and loaded up on cash from Western Bank ATMs in Saigon. No sign of Vietnamese guys. Nice working lady takes me to the police, lends me money. Police are useless. Twink shows up back at the hostel. He'd been looking for his boyfriend. He seemed legit befuddled. All his stuff was stolen too. Backstory. Guys met on a Vietnamese chat forum or something months back. Get together for a cross-country adventure. They're both from the Mekong Delta. Met at Twink's house. Always used his ID to check into places. Twink has no idea as to the other guy's real identity. Twink says among stuff stolen from him was the blue card for his motorbike back in his village. In Vietnam, the blue card ownership is what proves you own a vehicle. The registration has never changed when vehicles change hands. So if you have the vehicle and card in your possession, you own it. Twink figures the thief will be stupid enough to try to steal his bike. This makes sense to all the Vietnamese there. They suggest I join the Twink on the stakeout. Despite having no passport, money, clothes, etc. I decline. Twink races back to his village. The working girl told me the thief was Chinese Vietnamese by his accent, who apparently all regular Vietnamese hate, and she distrusted him as soon as she met him for this reason. I go to the consulate. They're useless. Won't give me the time of day with no passport or ID. No way to get money sent to me directly, for example, by Western Union because no ID. Have money sent to worker instead. Seriously, she saved my ass. Get a call from the Twink. He caught the thief. Seriously, criminals are fucking retarded. I didn't believe it was true. Not part of some double-down long con until I went to the police and got my stuff back. Takes a day for them to bring the thief and my stuff up from the Delta. Go to the police station. I got almost everything back, minus bank cards and some ID, including the money and especially my passport. I underreported like about $200, which the police kept, which was fine. I wanted to go to the Delta and show the local cops there my appreciation as well, but everyone said it wasn't necessary. Thief had clearly had the fear of God put into him. Police asked me if I want to beat him up too. Decline. Figure he'll get AIDS being a little guy in Viet prison, which is good enough for me. Continue on with my travels. Moral of the story, lock your shit up. I'm the only person I've ever seen traveling who always has their bags, including a day bag, locked and closed. But now I'll be sure to have it always locked to something even if I'm around. I can't believe how bold the thief was, pulling my bag from under my bed while I was sleeping inches away.
Screwed up my lower back in Kuala Lumpur. Barely could get out of bed one morning after some shenanigans. No travel insurance. Could barely walk 100 meters and even sitting was hell. Only laying down on my back was okay. Had a flight out of Singapore to India in 3 days. Just stayed in bed the whole time and then took a 10-hour bus ride to Singapore. Had to lie down in the middle of the bus once in a while and pop painkillers all the time. Then a 6-hour flight to India with Scoot, shitty low-cost airline, where even the water costs money. I'm pretty tall, so even without the back problem it's not fun to sit in a plane. Felt like an eternity to fly. Took me like 2 to 3 weeks of laying down and smoking hash every day to get myself fit enough to walk 1 kilometer with no real problems. Still have problems with it after 2 years. The first time I went to India, I got drunk in Delhi on cheap alcohol for a few days, then took a sleeper train to Jammu. Got sick in the middle of the train ride, luckily a better carriage with good toilets and no people really using them. Arriving in Jammu, a hangover hits me. Find a hotel to stay. Shitload of bedbugs. Got a bad hangover, was sick, can't really eat, was bitten by bedbugs all over, and it's like 37 Celsius and humid outside. Wanted to go to Kashmir, but the Pakistani rebels had just fired some missiles the same day, so they didn't really want people going there. And the trip was gonna be like 12 plus hours on a jeep, and I'm not even close to being healthy. Just said fuck it and left for the mountains.
Go to Japan for the first time. My favorite anime franchise has a series airing while I am there. Realize I fucked up booking my hostel and it's in an area pretty far from any nightlife, so I call it an early night to avoid a 4-mile walk back to it. Go back to the common room with 3 people in it eating microwave food. No one is watching TV and get the okay to turn it on. Find the channel it's on and begin watching it. Everyone clears out of the room within 30 seconds. People walk in the room, see I'm watching anime, and turn around to leave.
I used to work for a really shitty hostel in a nice town in the UK. I've seen many things. Besides the mentally ill, the homeless, and the weirdos, most of the people visiting hostels are pretty nice and good fun. Things I recommend. Don't book the cheapest dorm, it usually has the worst guests. Hostel owners and managers tend to be the biggest misers in existence, so if you book, I recommend you read cancellation policy carefully and book with a virtual card, so you can block it off and cancel for free in case something goes wrong. In general, hostel managers, especially long-term ones, tend to be misanthropes due to shit they've seen over the years. Someone will always snore in a dorm, get earplugs. Hostels will usually put you in a dorm with somebody else, it's unlikely they will let you have an empty room, mostly to avoid you spreading your shit everywhere or inviting someone over. Don't invite people over, always a big no-no for hostels. If you work there, very easy way to get laid. In general, it's easy to get laid. Avoid hostels with long-termers. Although hostels with long-termers can be more soulful because you have a social circle. They are also the best source for getting drugs, but I only drink, so I never needed it anyways. Don't be an asshole, you're paying fuck all, no one will tolerate your bullshit. Always look after your shit and keep in mind not all hostels have private lockers, etc. Call the place or right before booking. Keep your passport on yourself at all times, don't leave anything worth stealing around. Check the common area for meeting people up to go out, usually a good way to meet some companions and to go out. Hostels with individual shower cabins. For example, a room with just a shower and a shitter are your best bet for a private place. If you're down on your luck, most hostels offer work for volunteers. For example, 18 hours work in exchange of housing. In most places that is largely just sitting at the reception desk. If you're interested to be a long-termer, don't ask it outright, stay a week or so the manager and the receptionists are aware that you are not a creep basically. It's fair to say people asking for long-term stays immediately are 50% bums or weirdos, so avoid giving the wrong impression. Also, if you actually want to stay long-term, don't just book week to week, actually speak to the manager. They might give you a slight discount plus potentially put you in a long-termer room.
Not sure I have any real horror stories from airports. I think it helps that I live and mostly travel in Europe and mostly avoid the biggest airports, so I can rock up not much more than an hour before flight time and feel confident that I will get where I am headed. Realistically, I like to get there 90 minutes early, but 2 hours is virtually always too long. People lining up to board inexplicably early is a small peeve of mine, along with leaping out of seats and into the overhead bins while the plane is still taxiing after landing, both of which seem to be more common in Europe than the States, but I rarely let it bother me. Had some airport stress coming back home last Christmas from Puerto Rico, though. At the time, PR had a more stringent plague protocol than the mainland US. We are US citizens, and technically flew to Puerto Rico from a night in Newark. But because our voyage to San Juan originated in Zurich, we had to adhere to the Puerto Rican testing protocols for international arrivals, which were in flux. Some official sources said the tests had to have been administered 24 hours prior to arrival in Puerto Rico. while mainland US policy was deliberately vaguer with within 1 day, but we figured out at the last minute that the tests we had in hand might be too old for Puerto Rico. So we got new ones at the airport the day we left. No huge deal. On the way home, our mainland US layover wasn't overnight, but it was 7+ hours in Chicago. PCR tests were in short supply in Puerto Rico, so we figured we would get required tests in Chicago. All fine, except that because it was a single ticket from San Juan to Zurich, that just happened to change planes and park us an entire day en route at Chicago. They wouldn't let us board in San Juan. We ended up getting on the plane after some panic, but it involved invoking a manager to indicate a break in our travel in Chicago. And we got pulled aside gateside for mumbling confusion. It was all okay in the end.
The worst flight I ever took was in 2013. My company had booked this one for me, and so they'd gotten me a very cheap aisle seat deep in the coach. Fine. I was just flying from San Francisco to Atlanta. About 4 hours or so. I could practically hold my breath that long, I thought. But what I didn't know was that I was sitting in the middle of a large family. The father was in the middle seat on my left. His kids were on the other side of the aisle, and the mother was behind us. This might not have been such a bad situation, except that one of the children had some sort of intellectual or emotional impairment that made it impossible to sit still. The girl kept getting up and pacing up and down the aisle, until the flight crew finally grabbed her and dragged her back to her seat between her two sisters. The child began crying and screaming. The father squeezed past me to try managing this situation. The child kept crying, screaming, and trying to get out of her seat for about 10 minutes. Finally, she quieted down a bit, and the father resumed his seat. I offered to trade places with him or the mother, but he insisted it wasn't necessary. About 20 minutes later, the impaired child got into some kind of argument with her sisters. She resumed crying and screaming, fought her way out of the seat past her sister on the aisle, and resumed pacing deliberately up and down the aisle, flapping her arms compulsively. When she was dragged back again, the same sort of loud chaos resumed, except that this time one of the girl's sisters suddenly became nauseated and started projectile vomiting in all directions, including on me. So basically, I spent the next 3 hours in the middle of a group of impaired, panicky, howling children and enraged adults, with all of us covered in vomit.
Decided to go on a guided tour of the historic quarter in Rabat. Group is just me, 2 10 out of 10 Belgian cuties, and their old mother. Since I'm a burger and they're Belgian, the guide does the tour in English. Try to make eye contact with girls as we walk around, they don't even notice me. Whisper to each other in French the whole time, not even paying attention to the tour. I try to make chit-chat with their mother, even if she's not interested. Guide leaves us in a cafe. Belgians sit down for a coffee, and the waiter asks me if I'd like to see a menu. Now's my chance to impress the girls with my French skills. Non merci, je n'ai pas faim. Only I pronounce it, je n'ai pas faim. Waiter chuckles derisively and asks me to répéter, SVP. I repeat myself louder. Belgian girls start laughing. Guide is smoking a cigarette outside the cafe, he's laughing. Can't understand why everyone's laughing. Run out of the cafe, through the streets, and hide in a botanic garden. Sit on a bench and think about what I said. Realize I'd been yelling at the waiter, no thanks, I don't have a wife.
I did AirBNB in Rome and Naples, and it was pretty good. The host in Rome had a friend who was a really good tour guide who was British, Italian. Somehow he got us past all the lines in the Vatican. Felt illegal. We did a catacombs tour and we literally went to churches during Mass and casually walked behind the altars to secret entrances where there ancient pagan tombs. Again, felt illegal but was awesome. Took us to the restaurant that was built on top where Caesar was stabbed. The basement underneath the place where Caesar was stabbed was also his office. Now, I'm sure this was probably a classic Italian sleazeball trick, but the restaurant itself was such a relief because finally there was a place that felt authentic. Actual Italian food sucks, but I felt satisfied. The grandma ran the whole place by herself and just kept on handing us plates of food and wine. And the whole thing was only 25 euros. No extra charges or anything. The AirBNB in Naples was cool because imagine a wall of graffiti and there's actually a hidden door. Go through and there's shady tenements where none of the doors are labeled. But inside, it's absolutely gorgeous. Nobody stole my stuff while I was out exploring. It was all very clean. The host told me about her cousin's pizza restaurant that I would have never seen if it weren't for her. It was just a no-name hole in the wall, and then you go up to the second floor and there were people watching the World Cup gesturing at the TV and yelling. Finally, I was in real Italy. Everyone there was shady Elmao, but it felt like The Sopranos. The pizza there was actually good. It's different than America because I had to use a fork and knife, but it was so much better than the tourist trap. I think AirBNB is better outside the States. Here it's such a scam.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.